And good evening. I am glad to be with you, each one, here as we go to the next episode of the End Times Update. And I missed being with you all last Thursday night, though I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I am seeing here a signal that says the battery is not working on the camera right, so we'll hope that is okay. This technology. But just wanted to go ahead and jump right in here as we continue with the End Times Update. There have been a lot of things happen, of course, in the last couple of weeks. And for those of you on the mailing list, as I said, if you are watching much of the regular news, you're probably not hearing a lot, but there is a lot to talk about, and I am eager tonight to go over a few things here on this update. What we're doing, for those of you who are new to this, we're taking prophecies that we have been studying in scriptures, numbering them, starting with what Jesus said in Matthew 24. There's some 18 or 19 prophecies there. But we are numbering them, and then we are matching up current events that go with those prophecies so that you can have a pretty good idea of a lot of the prophecies that are being filled. And tonight, after the update, for those who stay for the class, this is a rather interesting topic tonight. And this is actually, it's more than that. It is quite amazing, because we are going to talk about some of the things that are happening globally that only could happen supernaturally. So we will look forward to talking on that here in a bit. But for now, let's go ahead and start with with this particular topic as we get into some of the prophecies and the fulfillments. So here is one we call it on our list, be Prophecy 2. And any of you who would like to have a list of these prophecies, feel free to email me here at davidcarylifecoach@gmail.com, and I'll be glad to get you that list, though you'll see some of them here as we talk tonight. But here we have this. We haven't talked about this prophecy being fulfilled yet. And it's rather interesting, thanks to our friend Marcy in Arkansas, who has shared some information with me. This is rather interesting, and you can find this, again, all these things that we share, you can find them easily online and verify a lot of the accuracy and all that's there. It's not real complicated you can still Google, but you can also look through other sources and find a lot of reports on these different topics. So anyway, here is one that we are talking about that has to do with the second prophecy. There will be false messiahs. And isn't it interesting that here is a report that there is a false messiah on the scene in Israel, massive... I'm going to blow this up a little bit so you can see this. Following that's growing. It's quite interesting. And I just find this whole thing quite interesting. This whole storyline is quite of new in a way, because I had just told someone recently I had not seen a lot of these a lot of the news having to do with this particular prophecy. So here we have interesting thing too, and this is a picture here, if you can see it, of this fellow that named Yanuka Rav Shlomo Yehuda. What's interesting about this is he's not just somebody who seems to have an amazing grasp of the Torah, Old Testament, first 5 books and others there, but he's been working miracles, and that fits some of the things Jesus said would happen in the end times. There have been many through the years who have claimed to be Messiah and who have had issues in following through, of course, but nonetheless, there have been many who claim to be, or that others claimed would be the Messiahs. In this case, it seems like there are many others who are touting this Rav as being a Messiah. So this is rather interesting and kind of new for some of us here as we look at these prophecies being fulfilled and how this fits that's what Jesus said. And it fits more than just the messiahs, false messiahs. It fits this whole idea of what's going to come as someone who can do miracles and signs and wonders. And that is part of what I see as this whole part of the pre-psych, the psyching up for what is end times, where there's kind of a mindset, global mindset, mind you, of expectations of people. So there's that. Let's go to the next interesting bit of news that popped up here in the last couple of weeks. This one is in regard to prophecy that Jesus said, there will be wars and rumors of wars, that we've numbered prophecy 3. And I need to turn this off, sorry. But here we have where Kim Jong-un says North Korea's goal is for world's strongest nuclear force. Isn't that interesting? Because we have here kind of it's a renewed nuclear arms race that is really picking up steam. Of course, and just as I was getting ready tonight, I ran across another news article where China is planning up their intercontinental nuclear warheads from 300 to 1,500. So you have China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all pressing very hard here for a nuclear force that's much more powerful than is. And that fits, we'll see more as the night goes on here. I'll tell you how that fits some other aspects of the nuclear war and the threat of war, rumor of war. It's a whole new era when we think about what's taking place there. Let's go to this interesting bit of news here in the last few days, where Jesus said there would be earthquakes and used the word seismos, which, as we know, is not just earthquakes. It's anything having to do with a wave as it pertains to land, water, air, anything that is very powerful in that sense. And yet, of course, what goes with volcanoes are earthquakes. But here is a very interesting bit of news coming out of the Hawaii Big Island. Hawaii volcano, world's largest, erupts for first time in decades. It's actually 40 years, if you read the article. But very interesting there. And Newsweek put out an article about this very volcano that is now actively erupting. Worst case scenario of Mauna Loa eruption, extremely destructive. And the article goes to show what could happen and might happen in there as this part of the earth is relieving pressure and stress from with the volcano. Now, it's interesting. It's not just there. It's happening in other places of the world. I was interested here that there are 2 volcanoes in Russia, Far East, and quite an interesting article came out of the Associated Press about that here recently. 2 volcanoes rumble into action in Russia's Far East. Worth noting and probably of interest to a lot of folks. Here's something that I find very fascinating, and that is that there are some global events taking place here that are building again that mindset of the one world global order. This is the French President Macron saying we need a single global order, and several news agencies picked up on this. Quite interesting. He's building the case that to address all of the world issues, and certain ones specifically now, that there's going to need to be something that is very much a group effort on a worldwide scale. But we know from what Jesus said that there would be many global events. Now, I was interested, I in fact, this afternoon while studying for this, I couldn't help but find myself fascinated. I did a little study and was interested in all the times that Jesus talked about the big global picture. Of course, one of the things that he said, one point, at the time when the tribulation of the days had not been cut short, no one would survive. And there's the big picture that he's talking of. But he talked about the persecution. You'll be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. You'll be hated by all nations. All nations. That's a global talk there. In the good sense, what we'll talk about here in a moment, the gospel of the kingdom will be preached, and this is Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations. Whole world, all nations. Again, global. And that's probably one of the big indicators I find so fascinating in this time, is that it's big picture, global worldviews. One of the things that I'm so interested in, when Jesus was given his warnings, as recorded by Luke, he says, "Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life, and that day will close on you suddenly like a trap, for it will come on all those who live on the face of the whole earth." So here he is. There's just over and over in Book of Revelation, same thing. This emphasis, this talk about the whole world, global. And I'm not sure a lot of Christians for many generations picked up on how that was. They probably didn't. I mean, picture anybody 2 or 3 generations ago, they wouldn't have had a clue how it could be the whole world on all of this. But we're just in that generation that gets to see the technology and understand. And here we have now being talked on a regular basis, this need for a single global order. Kind of interesting. Along the lines of the same thing, we have Vladimir Putin asking for creation of a digital payment system for international settlements. And this is a movement obviously gaining great steam. We're in our second or third week right now of the United States, with the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, working with, I believe it's 12 banks right now, testing digital dollar, and all that can be done with that. Very interesting. But here we have this news item where Vladimir Putin is saying that there needs to be a digital payment system set up for international settlements. Of course, the Chinese and the yuan, which is their dollar, they've had their set up and going here for some time. But it's a real interesting movement that is happening globally, where we do see a financial system coming into play. So that's very fascinating here. Another article, Putin calls for international settlements based on blockchain and digital currencies. And isn't that interesting that we have this happening here at this time, that with the FTX and all that happened with the billions of dollars that people have lost, and how that organization failed. It may have failed as a company, but it did not fail as it enhanced and worked on, improved the technology that is developing. Blockchain, if you haven't heard about that phrase, it's just simply a technology that allows companies and governments and whatnot to now implement a digital currency, whatever it might be. So it's quite interesting to see what's shaping up here, and that these fulfillments or these news items play right in. I'm going to mention again what we're calling Prophecy 12. The gospel will be preached to all people groups, in part because it is just so critical, I think, when we think about the timing of things. I've talked to a number of people in the last 2 weeks, and many find this probably as interesting as anything, so I repeat it tonight because one of Jesus' prophecies was that the gospel would be preached to all people groups, and then the end would come. And then the end would come. So kind of an interesting, very interesting thing here right inside the front cover of the Tyndale Chronological Study Bible, the 1 year Chronological Study Bible. And it says here inside on the copyright page, Tyndale House Publishers and Wycliffe Bible Translators share the vision for an understandable, accurate translation of the Bible for every person in the world. Each sale of the Holy Bible New Living Translation benefits Wycliffe Bible Translators. Wycliffe is working with partners around the world to accomplish Vision 2025, an initiative to start a Bible translation program in every language group that needs it by the year 2025. Again, I get this feeling so often that people are so busy, and I'm here in America. I'm here where there are a lot of people like me working hard day in and day out, making a living, having some good times with friends and travel, and just kind of living the American dream in many respects. And I'm not sure many of us realize what is happening. First of all, I don't think a lot of us want to know what is happening. But there are many of us that don't have a clue, and I'm still learning, so I don't know. I don't have the great handle on it all. We're going to talk in the next few minutes as we go on with this class, following this update here. But this is timing sensitive for those who are like, oh, where are we at in the end times? And hasn't every generation thought that Christ was going to return in their lifetime? This is different, and I mean very different. It should be kind of startlingly, it should be something that is almost unnerving for some people. Now, to me, it's very exciting. This is incredibly exciting because in my life, I'm in my 60s, and to think that I will get to possibly see what Jesus, well, it's very likely, looking at these numbers, unless something happens to me physically or otherwise accidentally, and I end up getting to make the transition to the next life, I'm going to see the end of the age. And this is probably one of the clearest markers, though it's not by itself. There are many markers. We're going to talk about that in the next hour. But I don't know what time frame you need for Jesus to say that the gospel would be preached in all languages, and to know that after all these years, since the Tower of Babel, back 3,500 years ago, whenever it was, I need to figure that out. But to think that since then, there's never been an ability for people to hear about God in every language, and that day is here. Like, if looking at this, a very good chance within 2 to 3 years. And Jesus said, when that happens, then the end will come. So quite amazing. All right. Well, that is a wrap on the update, and I am going to now go ahead and shift gears as we go into the class. Tonight, we've got an interesting topic: Bible prophecies, supernatural fulfillments. Bible prophecies, supernatural fulfillments. And I am just clicking over here on the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and take this now. I know a lot of people who used to chat on Facebook and are not as familiar with YouTube have told me they're not sure how to do that. I think there is a way you can click on chat and post a comment. Of course, you can always click on the subscribe button and get feedback in those ways. But I'm going to do something here because I think I'm going to type a hello and see if I can even post that on the chat. It does seem to allow that. Holly chatted a good evening earlier. If any of you are out there and want to try this, this is a new venue course, and so we're experimenting in several ways here, but we would welcome questions, thoughts, chat, otherwise here in the chat section. All right, the study tonight, Bible prophecy, supernatural fulfillment. And I'd like to also welcome, especially friends from the Cowboy Church here in Cordova, Tennessee, USA. A number of you have been talking to me that you're seeing these things. This study was originally planned to be a study in person for people. And thanks, Cindy. I see you just found the chat room there. Thank you. This was to be a study for some of the people, including Cindy here, on Cowboy Church in person. And then we had some issues that popped up and some problems, and we ended up having most everyone now watching this online, like the rest of you who tend to check in on this in time. But I do enjoy thinking that there are some 9, 10, or 11 people from the Cowboy Church that I'm enjoying Sunday afternoons at 4:30 Central Standard Time. They're in Cordova, Tennessee at the Houston Levy Community Center. Some worship. These are real cowboys, real people, and then they ride the horses afterward, and those are some beautiful, beautiful creatures there. And hey to Bob, my friend up in Nashville there. So yeah, I'm glad to see that there's some of you getting into the chat room okay here after all. Let's go into this study. And in fact, speaking of Bob that just checked in there, I'm hoping he will be able to join us here in the coming weeks. And we plan to go ahead and continue the update and even have some interaction. People, Bob is one who led one of the first studies I attended some 5, 6, 7 years ago in a home about end times, and it really was something that God used to help me wake up to where we're at in the history of mankind and history of the Bible, all that's there. So I'll look forward to having him on sometime here as we're learning again how to use the technology, and supposedly we're going to be able to do some on-screen talking and sharing with others that will make it good for those of you who are watching otherwise. What I want to do tonight is I want to jump into the end time study, Bible prophecies, supernatural fulfillments, and I want to go down through, once again, the prophecies we've studied as I have them listed. I'm going to go pretty quickly here. You can always go back and look at them. You can always request a list of them. Several of you have actually, quite a few have over these last few weeks. But here is where Jesus, and a lot of this is found in Matthew 24 in the New Testament of the Bible, which of course we're using that book because of its great credibility. I mean, hundreds of prophecies about the first coming of Christ, all of them fulfilled accurately. And it just has credibility. So we find ourselves going, why wouldn't we want to use this book, time-proven book on prophecy that, a lot of people would say, nothing special about it. Well, whether you believe God inspired it or not, which it claims to be inspired by the creator, God of the universe, whether you believe that or not, one thing that you cannot get past, or none of us can, who are truly open to finding truth, the book has not been proven in error. And that includes hundreds of prophecies, especially in the Old Testament, about the first coming of Jesus, which we're about to celebrate here at what we call Christmas. So anyway, we're going back to what Jesus said. And he even quotes from the Old Testament at one point, quoting Daniel. So, he recognized the Old Testament as scripture, as what it claimed to be. And great teacher that he was. But here he is, when asked by the disciples about the end times and about a comment he'd made when he was leaving the temple earlier this particular day, about not one stone standing on top of the other, and Peter, James, John, and Andrew came to him on the Mount of Olives and said, what were you talking about? And here is where he gave, in Matthew 24, a lot of prophecies. And so let's just go down through here. What he had said originally is not one stone would be left on another stone at the temple. He said, many will claim to be the Messiah and deceive many. He said, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. He said, there will be conflict between people groups and countries that would increase. And I give definitions there. In this case, the Greek word is ethnos, which is a race or tribe. And then Basileia is a kingdom or the realm of a ruling person or party, a nation, a modern nation. He said there would be famines, which is more than just people dying of starvation. It's a scarcity of food, destitution. So there would be great earthquakes. This has been a little confusing to people because this word is not just earthquakes. This is seismos. It has to do with what we talked about earlier, shaking, a shock caused by earthquakes, ocean waves, gale of wind, and the like. He said there would be disease. And Luke here talks about that. Dr. Luke, he was a doctor, a disciple. And said that there would be fearful events and great signs from heaven, but pestilences in various places. And that word, loimos, it's a deadly infectious malady, which probably we would say that the COVID-19 falls in that category very easily. Widespread sickness causing death. Christ said that his followers would be persecuted and killed, hated by all people groups. And I emphasize right now, because tonight's talk about this Bible prophecies, supernatural fulfillments, is truly about the amazing supernatural fulfillment of Scripture that has to do, and you're going to find this word global is key to all of this. And this is probably what sets it apart. I'm just realizing myself more and more as I study this, along with the rest of you students, scrappers in life. I'm realizing that there are many prophecies, but there's one thing that more and more I see they have in common, and that is they're big scale, they're global. And so this is quite an interesting thing here, and this right here shows up where even the feelings against Christ and his followers become a part of the end times prophecies. All right, Jesus said many of Christ's followers will stop believing and turn on each other. That's even going a step further than being hated by the world. That's where his own followers would turn on each other. And of course, many would turn away from the faith. He said many false prophets will appear and deceive many. He said the love of many would grow cold as wickedness increases. These are all things that Jesus described in the end times. And here's where I referred to earlier, this prophecy, the gospel will be preached to all people groups. And notice here in the scripture, again, this is Matthew 24, verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. And what he says next is interesting. The abomination, the lawless one, will stand in the holy place, the temple, that would be in Jerusalem, there on the Temple Mount area, no doubt. And this is where he quoted from Prophet Daniel. And this is very interesting because if you go back and read Daniel, so much of what's said there is fitting for what Jesus said and what Paul and Peter and John said. As you had, of course, John the Revelator in Revelation. So it's all just quite interesting how it all fits together and ties together as we have studied. The next prophecy, there'd be great distress in Jerusalem and Judea. This is where it comes away from the global picture for a bit and talks, and it's kind of centers the focus. Jesus' prophecy focuses on Jerusalem and Judea, and talks about the great distress and how that no one would have survived, but for the sake of the elect, those days would be shortened. And most scholars and most people would really feel that what's being talked about right here is truly having to do with something devastating like a nuclear war. It's just amazing. Jesus said false prophets, Christ and prophets would perform great signs and miracles and deceive the elect. If you read in Revelation, this is 13, I believe it is. This is really a part of that end time, as the book of Revelations talks about. There's going to be some amazing things happening at the end time along these lines. And it intrigues me that this deception is a key word. There's several key words that keep popping up besides this idea that it's big scale, global. But the whole idea of deception, lawlessness, wickedness, all of these things that in a way we're seeing more of now. And of course, part of it's because of this communication that's taken place worldwide, but that really indicates something on large scale along these lines. Jesus said John saw a global system established where a mark was required to buy or sell. Excuse me, Jesus didn't say that. This is what comes out of Revelation. I have inserted this as Prophecy 16 because in the picture that John saw in Revelation, it really does appear that what takes place is right here, kind of before if you read Revelation 14, and I know not all Revelation is probably in a natural sequence, not like what Jesus talked in Matthew 24, but the book of Revelation does seem to have a sense of timing that fits what Jesus said. And it's quite interesting that in it all, right in this time, it appears before Revelation 14, the Son of Man comes on the cloud to harvest the earth, that there is this critical time. And what's kind of important about that is that this Antichrist, he has such power over the believers at that time. Almost you get the feeling that he might be in a way conquering them and seeming to be winning out over the followers of Christ on earth. But in all of that, what God does is he makes kind of the deciding point of those who will accept this mark that identifies them with the Antichrist, the lawless one, the one who sets himself up as God, but who is not God. This mark, whatever it is, it's his number will be 666. It's a man's number, however that plays out, that will be no doubt a deciding point, because what happens is that according to Revelation and what John saw and what Jesus says, there is a harvesting of the earth where the believers who did not accept the mark are rescued and saved from the wrath to come. And the wrath to come is very clearly, Revelations 15:16, it's very clearly against those who have accepted this mark of, they call it the mark of the beast, but it's what identifies people with whatever this is system on earth against God. So that's that prophecy. Then we go on back to Matthew 24. There will be terrifying, catastrophic events in the heavens. Kind of a key word here, immediately after the distress of those days, whatever days those are. Again, and there are great distress. We have this, and you'll see this now in several places, both in Revelation and in Daniel, this constant reference to something that's happening: sun darkened, moon not give its light, stars falling from the sky. Quite interesting there. Interesting that Dr. Luke puts in here, right along with some of these others, this prophecy 18, on the earth there will be roaring, tossing of the sea that will cause alarm, even hearts failing, death from fear. But there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars on the earth. Nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. Men will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. But in this case, the thing we're adding is what Luke noticed: there will be roaring, tossing of the sea that will cause alarm. Interesting there. And then at that time, and this fits in conjunction with both Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Son of Man will come on the clouds in great glory. It will appear in the sky. And notice here again, all the nations of the earth will mourn. All the nations of the earth. So this is another global indicator. It's just over and over and over. And I'm going to emphasize that because tonight we're about to talk about what's supernatural and amazing with this global thing that is happening. It says here, they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory, and he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. But rather amazing, second coming of Christ talked about here in that respect. And Paul talked in 1 Thessalonians 4 that Christ's followers will meet Christ in the air, with the dead in Christ coming forth first. I like the way that Paul talked about this. We are alive and are left to be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in there, and so we will be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage each other with these words. And isn't that kind of opposite of what many people associate with end times talk? How many Christians do you know? Christians. I can understand about non-believers feeling some concern and fear, but Christians who find this all so unnerving. I was there, so I'm not criticizing anyone, but isn't it amazing that for us, this should be one of the most exciting and bright times in our life to anticipate, to think. We humans, born into this world, just like everybody else, and growing up and all that goes with that, we in this generation are seeing these things happen that no other generation since Christ has seen. The global, amazing global prophecies being fulfilled. And here we are. We're getting to see them. I mean, this is how it should be something that does give us encouragement. And to think that what we've been living for, supposedly, as believers, what we've been looking for with the great hope of an eternal home, that we're going to be a part of this whole process whereby God's people are rescued from the negativity and evil of this world. There should be some real excitement and encouragement in thinking on these scriptures. And I think that's exactly what Paul is saying and expecting believers to draw comfort with. I want to go on now to something here, and I'm going to just put it on one screen for now. I want to ask the question, what kind of global developments would have to happen for these prophecies to be fulfilled? All these that we've just listed, and there are more that we could talk about, but there are some things that would have to happen as I've been going down through these. And what intrigues me is that all of them, it appears, have to do with something global. For Jesus' comments to have meaning and to have relevance to the age and to the people that live at this time. There'd have to be global physical distress, which I guess you're hearing the same thing I'm hearing about the climate change and all that goes with that worldwide. There'd have to be global persecution and prejudice. There'd have to be global apostasy and wickedness. There'd have to be global evangelism, global translation, because evangelism would call for that if it was global. There'd be global communications for people, everyone, to see and hear and witness what's going on, which also includes global audio-visual, global currency and financial system for what John prophesied. And to have that work, there would have to be a global ID system. How would anybody know to take your money and not your neighbor's? There has to be a global ID system. And to implement and to have the authority to carry things out, there'd have to be a global government. Now, there's probably more that in time we'll discover here as we study along, and I'd welcome anybody else throwing things on. But this is where I'm telling you about this supernatural fulfillment. For things to happen at a global level, it's not on the person to person, it's not on the company to company, it's not on the country to country. This is global. This for these prophecies to be fulfilled, it takes somebody way bigger than the president of the United States or the prime minister of president of any country. It takes more than one powerful leader or a group of G20 leaders. This is something that's going to happen much, much bigger than any of that. And it's going to be, yes, it's going to involve governments and government leaders. It's going to involve corporations and corporate leaders. But all of this, and I've had people say, oh, the United States will never vote a lot of these things in. And I want to tell you, it's not going to boil down to whether you and I vote. I hope you understand that. It took me a long time to understand that. But I'm realizing more and more, this is something that's going to be happening through a group of people who have power and who have money and who control money. There's an old saying that he who has the gold writes the rules. And that's pretty much the way things are happening and developing. But this is something that's going to be, and I, for those of you on the mailing list, I'd like to have any of you join or let me know if you'd like to be on the mailing list. But I'd like to share some information. If you haven't seen it, there is a great documentary out there right now that puts a lot of this in perspective, and I'd be glad to give that link to you if you would so desire. But here we go. This global, and only, it takes something supernatural, wouldn't it, to pull together a time, an end time that involves all of these things to bring the world to a certain point where it has an end and where the Creator God proves that He is the God. This is a very important and exciting talk in the sense that we are talking about something very supernatural. In fact, my friend Bob, that I've mentioned a time or two tonight, I liked his word picture of how that it appears that somebody threw all the pieces of the big picture of the ending up in the air as pieces of a puzzle, and that they are just coming down into perfect place. And that is a good description of what is happening here in the end time in regard to what Jesus and others prophesied in the Holy Bible, saying it would happen. The pieces were all thrown up, and for a couple thousand years, things have been up in the air, so to speak. But now the pieces are coming down, falling into place, and it's supernatural. It's the chances of this happening like this are just quite amazing. Let's go to happenings since 1945 that are fulfilling prophecy for the first time in history. This is part of this I should have put supernatural happenings since 1945 that are fulfilling prophecy for the first time in human history. Now, when we talk about wars and rumors of wars, it is true that there have been wars since Abel and Cain had their little war between them, to the wars that have taken place for centuries now between countries and kingdoms. So interestingly enough, this one is a little bit tough to talk about or to measure on the one hand. On the other hand, the fact that Jesus talked about wars and rumors of wars, there is something that did happen in 1945 and not long after that really gave that scripture new meaning. As so many of the prophecies, many of them that we could say, hey, that's been going on forever. But something has changed in regard to most areas of life, and it doesn't take you long to see this. There's an intensification, there is a ramping up that is global, that is changed from all centuries, millenniums prior. 1945, when the first nuclear bomb was dropped there, and it was developed, of course, in 1942, but it tested in 1945 New Mexico, and then shortly after it was dropped, the uranium-based bomb in Hiroshima, killing 80,000 people instantly. And then it dropped a second bomb, Fat Man in Nagasaki, killing 40,000 instantly. So, and then shortly, just years after, Russia tested their first atom bomb, the arms race began. Now 9+ countries have nuclear bombs. So when you talk about Jesus saying wars and rumors of wars, the wars part, there was a new threat that emerged in mankind, and never before did they have this kind of destruction, potential destruction, happening so easily. That's worth noting, because I use that as kind of the kickoff, just because from that, then another thing happened in 1945, and that is what became, and up to this point, never had a need to have a unification of nations. But now there became a need. So in 1945, you had the United Nations organized, developed, started out October 24th, 1945. 51 countries signed up at the beginning. Now we have 193 nations plus involved. But the whole thing initially was set up to say we don't want to have any more nuclear wars like this, at least nuclear bombs. So they were pulling together to unite against nuclear war. And that's important, again, first time in history. And we'll be able to say this about everything that we look at here for a few moments. I list the secularization partly because of the order of the prophecies. It's hard to put a date on this, obviously, because this has been a movement for a good while, but it's a movement that in recent time has really ramped up. And you are hearing statistics, no doubt, like I have, but it's not just a matter of the separation of church and state. It's a process of where people are literally abandoning the faith. They're giving up faith. And there are a lot of studies out there that are showing exactly how, by large numbers, people are leaving their are abandoning their belief system in a God, and that's secularization. Of course, going to the nth degree is persecution, because people are not just saying it's not possible. Now they are angered and antagonized by those who do believe. That's part of the whole secularization process, where there's anarchy and lawlessness. But that is on a global scale like never before. There's the translation, computerized translation. We'll talk about computers in a bit, but this is important, especially when we start talking about the scriptures being made available in every language, so that when Jesus says all the world will hear the gospel or understand it in their own language, they'll come in acquaintance with the truth. Then the end will come. That's a very critical thing. And part of why Wycliffe Bible translators moved their date from 2150, that was their goal not too many years ago, to have the gospel in every language. They moved it up to 2033 here just 3 or 4 years ago. But because these translation services, by people and organizations who don't have anything to do with faith and God and prophecy and whatnot, they could care less probably about most of that. They still are providing amazing services that Bible translators can use, and it's helping that computers, they're helping with this whole process of Jesus' prophecy becoming fulfilled. Of course, the audiovisual communication, this is an incredible thing. Numbers 5 and 6 here tie together quite nicely. And I'm intrigued. When I first had the chance to do this study 4 or 5 years ago, there was no satellite constellation or satellite yet in space for this purpose. And since then, Starlink, that Elon Musk has put in place, it has already over 3,000, last count I heard, and it's probably more than that now, because they're steadily sending them up. They're steadily launching these rockets with satellites. It was over 3,000 now, and 90% of the world, was the last count I heard, has access. They believe that in the end, here just in a few short years, they will be able to have people in every area of the earth watching TV on this. So very, very fascinating. But this is in our lifetime, never before, never before. Of course, number 7 here, computerization, both the supercomputers and the personal. We all are using personal computers steadily with our smartphones. The supercomputers, I don't even know how to describe. When they talk about trillions of billions of calculations in a minute or maybe second, I can't understand that. I don't get a feel for it at all. But what I can tell you, what I do understand, is when Bill Gates tells us that there is now technology in place right now that you could have anyone tracked in the world with an ID and tracking all things from vaccinations to income and expenses, that it could be used, that now the computer technology is there. That doesn't have to be developed. It's still being developed in crazy, crazy ways. But isn't that interesting? I do understand that when a computer expert tells me the technology is there. Of course, we mentioned digitization. That's the process where pictures and objects, images, sounds, documents, they're all put into a computer readable format. There are 3 things that really come out of that are critical for us when it comes to prophecy. There's the digital ID, which we talked about. Everyone on earth has a digital ID, digital currency, money exchange. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then the digital social credit system. We're going to talk about that in a minute, because a lot of people that I talk to have not heard a thing about this. And this is not new. This is developing regularly as we speak, has been for maybe 3 or 4 years now, quite aggressively. So if you haven't heard of that, you want to listen here in just a minute or two, as you marvel at these prophecies that are being fulfilled. There is, I mentioned number 9, it's kind of out of place here, but the nationalization of Israel had to happen for prophecies to exist. Remember, 2,000 years between 72 AD or thereabouts and here in 1948, there was no country of Israel. There was no place. Think of all those generations probably wondering how some of this prophecy could take place without a country called Israel, or a people of God, as in his original chosen people. But that happened in 1948. So there you go. Things that had to happen. It happened, by the way, I marvel at this, that the prophecy about that happening, that was going to happen in one day, it happened in one day. United Nations, their involvement declaration. I mean, it's just incredible how these prophecies, if that doesn't make a believer of people, they're really fighting the system here. They're really fighting the truth system. And I understand some of that. I do. It's human nature to not want to believe certain things. Then number 10, globalization. That I throw that in there because that has been a talk of, believe it or not, people in the secular world who are very intrigued how that there's kind of been a movement in time due to all these factors coming together. But for when Jesus puts all these statements together and prophecies about a global something, well, there has to be a feel for globalization, and it exists now. Was created by many people who did not believe in God, but it exists. It went from country to country, to company, person to person. It's a global world now. We, you and I both, on our smartphones or computers, the internet, have to talk about that there. It's a small world. It's a small world, and that's because there is now this feel that we are tied to most everybody around the world. 11 is cryptocurrency. We talked about that a bit ago. That's just a new thing in the last 3 or 4 years that has, I'm so interested Here, the Bitcoin that everybody used to laugh at, scoff at, and it certainly made a lot of people rich and then made a lot of people broke. But it isn't that Bitcoin was the amazing thing. It's the technology that was set up in place so that Bitcoin could function and grow. And that blockchain, as we talked about earlier, that's what's developed. And just amazing. Isn't that interesting? That's just in recent years. But how critical is that to think of the prophecy that Jesus said, where everybody who was to buy or sell would have to have a mark or a sign or a way. And how would that have been tracked? How would anybody ever be able to do something like that? How would a system in the world be able to manage that if there wasn't some technology in place? Here we have it. 12 global rating system. I want to go 13 first. I just want to mention that there is an anti-Israel movement, and that Russia with its allies, if you haven't read Ezekiel 38, that'd be of interest to you. That's one of the scriptures we studied, but it talks about what's going to develop in the end, and it is shaping up kind of in an odd way, kind of in an eerie way, where there's a strong anti-Israel sentiment developing geopolitically between countries. I want to just close with talking about the global rating system, what I talked about a bit ago. And this is where, again, any of you are interested, I'd like you to please feel free to email me at davidcarey.lifecoach@gmail.com, and I'll be glad to send you a link to a documentary. But it's an hour and 20 some minutes long. It's something that if you are at all concerned about what is going on everywhere worldwide in the news, I really want to encourage you to watch this. I am hesitant to say much right here on this because I value this opportunity to talk with you all, and we had some 400 watch the last showing, and it tells me there are a lot of people who are really benefiting from the information as I am growing and learning myself here. But this rating system, it's ESG. If you don't know what ESG stands for, it stands for environmental social governance, and it's critical that you get a feel for this. I didn't expect this to be one of the main ways that Christians will be oppressed or influenced, but the more I learn about it, the more I realize that this is a system that is fast being set up. It's not through governments as the United States working with its citizens. It's being set up through the United Nations working with corporate leaders. And I don't have to, this is not conspiracy. This is not dreaming of something to try to make something sensational. This is life. This is real life. It's going to affect you and me. It's going to affect us very much. And not that many years down the road, it's already affecting us. What am I saying? It's already affecting us. But I just want to encourage you to get familiar with this. If you care at all, when Jesus said to be ready, when he said to be on guard, when he said to be aware of what's going on, I think he meant to be aware of the times we're in, how that the prophecies that he said would be at some point being fulfilled. There is zero doubt in my mind. I'd love to have a vote here someday with many of you. I think you all would see, for the most part, there are still some skeptics. There are some people still seeking and searching like I did for years. But I think you would, the more you study, you come to realize that this is the time. This is the end of the age. And it's a very wonderful time, but it's most important, a time to becoming closer to God, seeking him, finding a place where there's Bible teaching, small groups, people that you can interact with, those that you can grow in the faith, but coming down to this simple thing where you can experience God in a more meaningful way, because that is what will matter at the very end. I see my time is up. I hope this has been helpful. We will next week talk about, actually we're getting into 2 weeks now, the last 2 weeks of this class, preparations. Next week will be psychologically, socially, and financially. And then that last week of this class, we'll be talking about a a great ending to our lives, whether it's end times or otherwise, but it's going to be also spiritual preparations and physical preparations. So hopefully there will be some benefit for those of you who are wanting to follow along. Feel free to, again, subscribe if you're here on YouTube, or feel free to just email me and I'll put you on the mailing list at davidcarylifecoach@gmail.com. God bless you, each one. Have a great night.